Thank you all for being with us this morning. Really excited to get the update from Jessica here. Just piggybacking on what Matt said, December 7th is the deadline for the RPAC investment. Uh, Please, do your part. RPAC's really important. They do a lot to protect our industry, and they need our support. You got an email yesterday, so quick $25 makes a big difference, and you might win free dues. So, and yeah, we're really excited to bring the general meeting annual breakfast back. So I hope to see all of you there on the 2nd. And I'm going to turn it over to Jessica. Jessica, how are you doing? Thanks for being with us.
I am great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be with you today because we have brand new research hot off the press from our profile home buyers and sellers. And I'm going to be sharing the latest and greatest from our Realtors Confidence Index. So really fresh data. I will say it's all on a national scale. So I know you have your local economist who's going to be going to your meeting. So it's great because I'm going to share national data and what we're seeing on a demographics slant as well. So let me jump in. I have a lot of slides here. We'll zoom through them. I'll try and break it up with some personal anecdotes of making fun of my family generally because they're an easy target because they are not here. So we'll do that. And if you have questions at the end, I'm happy to take those questions as well. You're getting me at my freshest because I have two other Zooms today with Alaska and with Charlottesville, Virginia. So at the end of the day, I'll just lose my voice. But right now I'm hot off of yoga and I have my smoothie, so I'm good to go. All right, so let's jump in. The first thing I want to say is let's go beyond the headlines. When I hear the news right now and it talks about real estate, it is really, really bleak. If you only read the headlines, it is very depressing information. I really want to take this beyond the headlines that we're seeing the sky is falling, that making comparisons to 2008, to the boom and the bust. This is not the same real estate environment today as during that time period. But if you watch the Instagram reels, if you look at TikTok videos, they're going to say that. And let's give you some data so that if a client comes to you, you can be prepared to go back to that client with actual data, with actual numbers that show that this is more like 2018, 2019 when we look at the real estate market. When we look at days on market, we know that we're still towards all-time lows. Days on markets are ticking up, but we're ticking up from an all-time low of 14 days. We're now at about 19 days on a national scale. If we bring this back and we look at a wider spectrum, what we're looking at is 96 days on market. So that is a very, very different conversation with a seller expecting that that home is going to be on the market for maybe 100 days, because that's the midpoint. And it's very possible if that home is not priced correctly, that it sits on the market for a long period of time. Today, that's a very different conversation. The majority of homes are actually moving within a month. The other thing that I think we need to keep in mind here is that when we look at spring of this year, so just a few months ago, really, we were looking at an environment of a lot of frenzied activity. People knew that interest rates were going to go up. And so buyers felt all of this pressure to be able to make sure that they could move on that home, make sure that they could have a ratified contract because they may have had a rate lock. And so we saw that we had a peak of 5.5 offers for every home that was listed. That is a lot of frenzied, crazy activity during that time period where people were seeing homes for about 15 minutes before they put an offer on it. Now it's down to 2.5 offers for every home that's listed. This is both the median and the average dating back to 2015. So we are looking at a very normal market at this point, as opposed to that frenzied, out of control market of the last 2 years that frankly was just not healthy, because we had those bidding wars where homes were going over 100,000 more than asking price. Just insanity if we look at that market. If we look at the market now, we do see that people are still waiving contingencies on both the home inspection and the appraisal. The one thing I'll say about this, we don't have a long history on this data. So this is the last month's data. But if we look at this, we only have a history back to 2021. And the reason why is because realtors came to us and they said, people are waiving contingencies. We're nervous. We're realtors. We're working with these clients. We wouldn't advise this necessarily, but these buyers want to do this in this frenzied environment in this marketplace today. The peak that we saw was nearly a third of home buyers waiving both the appraisal and the home inspection contingency. Now we see it at about 19%. It is lower than where we had seen the height, but again, I don't have a long history on this to know what normal is. I suspect this is still elevated in the environment today. What we are seeing is that realtors are smart, though. They're bringing in that home inspector before that home is ever under contract, before that offer is in. And we also know that about a quarter of the market pretty much consistently is still paying all cash. So if you're paying all cash, you don't need that appraisal contingency. So we do see those going hand in hand to relate. The other point that we are seeing in the market and that we're hearing a lot of is mom and pop investors and vacation home buyers. I would say there's no clear definition at this point of one versus the other, because if you're Airbnb-ing that property or putting it on VRBO, but you're also going to stay in that property for some point of the time, are you a vacation buyer or are you an investor? There's really no clear definition anymore with technology and the sources that are out there to use those tools. I love those tools, but I know that they can be hotly debated in communities as well. When we look at this, what we do see is we're about 15% of the market. There's a lot of volatility in this data point on a month-to-month basis, but we're not at the height. The height was January of this year. If we remember back to January, that was a long time ago at this point. We know that there was a lot of investors who jumped into that market for a really particular reason. We had the lowest inventory we've ever recorded back to 1999 at that point in January. And so a lot of people said, wait a second, if there's no inventory of a product, of any product, why don't I jump into the marketplace right now, either for a short-term investment property and I'll flip it, or a short-term rental or a long-term rental. And so people did jump into the marketplace thinking that as well. If we look at this now, we're back down towards the norm, given the volatility though. The one point that I want to make here is that when I see the TikTok reels or the TikTok videos and the Instagram reels, I'm hearing a lot about the expectation that prices are going to fall, that there's going to be a lot of distressed sales in the marketplace, that we're going to be back into an environment where there are foreclosures and short sales. I'm just going to say that's bogus. We do not see that in the data at all. And we do not see any of those headwinds that we had in 2008 that really led to that crisis. We do not see that. And I want to give you a couple charts on what I'm seeing in the data and how you can really combat that if a client comes to you with that. The first one is just to give them this chart, because this actually shows that realtors who are working with a distressed sale, if we go back to 2009, in the spring of 2009, half of realtors, 49%, were working with a seller who had a distressed sale. Today, it's 2%. It bounces around on a monthly basis. You can see that line is pretty boring and flat towards the end there. It bounces around between 0 to 1 to 2% consistently, and it really doesn't change much. The reason why is because home prices have gone up so astronomically, especially in the last 2 years, that there is really no seller who would be in a situation, even if they had something really tragic that happened in their life, that they would put that home on the market without equity. If we look at the typical owner right now who purchased a home 10 years ago, they have $210,000 in housing equity just in that last decade. So these owners are really sitting on a lot of money when we look at this. And so we really just don't see that environment that would be hot for distressed sales. The other reasons why, of course, are that when we look at this market, we're in a new paradigm. We really are. This is a very, very different buying and selling environment than we really have been in the past. The three reasons why is we have incredibly tight lending standards. If we look at lending standards right now, we know that it's hard to find a mortgage. You have to have a high income. You have to have a high credit score. You have to have money in reserves along with that down payment and everything pulled together and really have your ducks in a row. We do not have subprime lending. We don't have balloon loans or no doc loans. If you're a gig worker, you really have a very difficult time obtaining a mortgage in this environment. The other factor that's at play here that really does make it a new housing paradigm is we have low inventory. We've been underbuilding for over 15 years, and we do not have the inventory to support the population today. We're short by 4.5 to 6.5 million homes in this environment. And while we've seen housing starts go up, we're continuing to see delays in actually getting those homes built. So if we think about homes that may be under construction, they're running into supply issues, they're running into labor issues, and they're really having a struggle actually putting that product onto market and having a home buyer be able to move into it. And in fact, we've seen a lot of canceled contracts in the last couple of years as builders ran into struggles. And the third one is demographics. We have a wave of young adults who are coming into this environment. They do not have a place to move to. And so in this time period, we're seeing a rise in rent and a rise in home prices because of the lack of housing stock. And I'll show you some data on that. So I'm going to not go too into depth there. And the other one is tenure in home. People are staying in their homes for a longer period of time. It is no one's American dream to move into a nursing home today. And in fact, we're seeing people purchasing primary residences later in age. And so I'm going to leave that there as well, because I'm going to go in depth on that one as well. Moving forward for the next year, at least, we do know that we have a contraction in home sales. All of that said, if mortgage rates tick down, and in the latest week of data, they actually are ticking down. So it is very possible that home buyers can come into this environment. But if inflation stays high, if interest rates stay high, that's going to mean a contraction in sales because people will not be able to afford homes. So this is really what we're looking at. In the last 8 months, we have seen a contraction in sales. We hope that this does not continue moving forward for an extended period of time. But for next year, Lawrence Yun, our chief economist, his forecast for next year is a contraction of 7% of sales, but in an environment where we continue to have home price growth. And the reason why we have home price growth is we don't have enough inventory. So in that environment, it is slightly unusual where we will have home price growth at 1% on a nationwide scale. That being said, in some pockets, in some areas of the country, it's going to be stronger than that. In some areas, it'll be weaker than that, but certainly a positive growth environment for home prices. If we look at this chart just visually, what we can see is that the green is that frenzied activity over the last couple of years that is unusual, and it really sticks out there. And if we look at 2022 and 2023, we're more in line with 2018, 2019 sales activity in the marketplace. All right, so I want to shift gears here quite a bit, go into a third little point here. We are in a virtual world. Last week was our annual meeting at NAR in Orlando. Hurricane Nicole threw a wrench into it. We had a lot of Zoom meetings. We had a lot of folks who joined via Zoom. I am obviously joining you via Zoom today. I took my yoga class via Zoom this morning. We are living in a virtual world. We have all embraced it. I didn't want to go out and jump in my car this morning. And so I had that option to join the class via Zoom, and I took it. When we look at this, what we see is a lot of people are embracing this environment and this world that we are in today. And when we look at home buyers, they certainly are as well. 8% of home buyers in the last month are still only seeing their home via virtual tour, a showing, an open house, that they're not physically walking into that home. I will say that puts a lot of pressure on the agent, a lot of pressure on realtors to really show that home in a way to a client where there's a lot of reliance and a lot of trust in that relationship to be able to say, this is what the home smells like, what the home sounds like, because you can't pick that up from a virtual tour. And in some areas, people are purchasing $1 million homes without physically walking into them. I think this is a very interesting trend. We had no reason to collect this data before the pandemic, and it's certainly happening. Some of the reasons why, of course, are tight inventory. If you don't have time to actually get to that home, that's very possible. But the other reason why is the distance moved, and that has skyrocketed in the last year. If people are moving for a longer distance away to outer suburbs, to small towns, they're not going to be able to get there as quickly before that home could go under contract. And again, because of this low inventory environment. What we have seen in the last year is that there is really a push towards small towns and into rural areas for home buyers. And there's really 3 reasons why and at play here. One is that virtual environment. We know that a lot of people in the last year have had permanent decisions from employers of, you are allowed to work from home. You have this hybrid environment. We'll say Elon Musk aside, who told everyone at Twitter, you need to come back into the office. Most people now in the tech setting, at least, do have that virtual option, and a lot of office workers do as well, at least some flexibility in hybrid settings. So not commuting 5 days a week, maybe just a couple, or maybe a couple a month. When we look at this as well, the other factor at play is affordability. If you cannot afford to buy in the city center, you're going to go further out. And we already saw this pre-pandemic. We saw that young millennials, they were as likely to purchase in a small town as they were in a city center, and affordability had a lot to do with that. The third factor at play, and why we're seeing this activity as well, is we're actually seeing a lot of people say, wait a second, where is my support system? Where is my friends, my family who could help me in life? And so we see that people are moving farther out. So some of it could be chasing the grandbaby. As older buyers at age, they may say, where is my family and support system that way? It could also be younger buyers who are saying, wait a second, it's really hard right now. If my kid is sick, how do I actually have daycare? Well, grandparents are really helpful. And so that becomes a situation where that helps that support system going both ways, caregiving going both ways there. When we look at miles moved, just to reinforce this point here, we had seen a very boring line from 1989 to 2021 of just moving 10 to 15 miles on an annual basis. We really just don't see people moving that far. This year, we saw it rise all the way to 50 miles. New York Times actually did a piece on this specific data point. So it's in the paper this morning as well. But I do think this is fascinating. A lot of the media has picked up on this in the last week, just because this is such a massive change and really reinforces the change that we all have had in our lives in the last couple of years. All right, I want to talk about millennials. I know it's everyone's favorite hated topic, but I do think it's important. And the reason why is it is the biggest segment of home buyers today. They really are a force to be reckoned with in the home buying market. I know we hear a lot about avocado toast and them not wanting to be able to purchase a home, wasting all their money, having high expectations. I will say that that is all bogus when we actually look at the data. So let's take a look at it. The first thing I want to show you is just the US population. So when we look at the US population overall, we see the green, the little pandemic babies born in the last year. I feel like so many friends have new little babies in the last year. And then we also see with the gray, the bars get shorter over time. Not that many people make it past 90, but when they do, that's a great birthday. Smack dab in the middle of this chart is the blue. The blue are the millennials. And in the middle of the blue, what we can see there, one, the millennial generation is bigger than all the others. And their brothers are taller, so there's just more of them. But smack dab in the middle of the blue is the median age of a first-time home buyer, or at least what a first-time home buyer was. This chart is not updated, so I need to do that. What we have seen is that the median age of a first-time home buyer has actually gone up to 36 years old. It had been 33. What's really important here when we look at this is that the largest population that we have in the US is 26 to 33. So it's more common to be those ages than any other age in the country right now. When we look at this, what it means to me is that we do not have enough inventory. Because if we look at this massive population that's aging into peak household formation, when they would buy their first house, when they would rent independently or with a roommate, we do not have enough units to support these young adults. We really have been underbuilding. And unfortunately, that's where we see these rise in prices, bidding wars on rental units. All of these bidding wars that are happening really have to do with just this massive population growth and not having the inventory to support them. The other thing that I want to talk about here and why that chart was not updated is looking at the median age of buyers and how this has grown dramatically in the last year as well. When you look at the median age, what we have seen is that the typical age of a first-time home buyer used to be within a really tight band of 28 and 32 years old. And today it's 36 years old. A first-time home buyer is now closer to 40 than they are to 30. I'm just going to let that sink in because I think that's a pretty strong statement to hear that. We used to think of people having their household formation and buying their first house as a young adult, and now we're seeing it more towards 40. This is really important when we think about this and the delayed wealth gains that could be had, the hurdles into homeownership that these buyers have. We've talked about some of them, lack of inventory, affordability, but then of course the outside pressures as well, like student loan debt, credit card debt. All of these things pile up and it makes it very hard to save for a down payment, especially in this inflationary environment that we're in right now. The other factor that I want to talk about too is the median age of repeat buyers. When we look at that, what we can see is the typical age of a repeat buyer used to be 36 years old. They were already on their second home. Today, it's 59 years old. That buyer could be looking towards retirement. They're still purchasing a primary residence, and that is a massive change than what we have seen historically. That person could be living longer and working longer and thriving longer, but they're also purchasing that primary residence later in life. One of the things that I do want to talk about here is a pretty big finding that we found in the last year among first-time home buyers who successfully entered homeownership. When we look at young adults overall in the US, this is census data right now. What we found is that there is the highest share of young adults who moved home in the last year, a couple of years really. We saw nearly 18% of young adults were moving home in 2020. A lot of people went home because they could skip paying rent. They had the ability to do so. Maybe they could even save for a down payment or pay down their student loan debt and really get on top of their finances. And remote work allowed them to do that. We also know there was a lot of job losses for this young adult population. So they might have had to move home or they could have decided to go to school online. All of these factors at play. But there are some young adults who did take advantage of this. I will say, this is where I'm going to make fun of my little sister. She absolutely did this as well. She moved in with me and she was able to pay down all of her debt, car, her student loan debt, and save for a down payment. She successfully became a single female home buyer last year around this time, right before Thanksgiving. It was super fun to move her into her new condo. She didn't want to ask her friends, so she only asked me and my husband, and that was amazing. And then it was super amazing to make Thanksgiving dinner for the three of us. Really should have ordered out. That being said, I give her a hard time, but I am really, really proud of her because she was able to buy in this environment with the help of a good realtor and a good mortgage broker. When we look at this, she is not the only one who did this. It is the biggest share of first-time home buyers who moved directly from their family member's home into homeownership that we have ever recorded at 27%. I think this finding is really striking. It jumped from 21% last year to 27% this year of young adults moving directly from their family member's home into homeownership. The only way that these young adults seem to have been able to enter into homeownership is because they could skip rent. So when we see rental payments going up, when we see the rental cost of leases going up by 30, 40, 50%, we know that those young adults are going to be hit or those renters are going to be hit over time financially. So these young adults really had that leg up. The other way as well is there was a down payment transfer of wealth that we saw for first-time homebuyers. 22% of them actually had down payment assistance from mom and dad. And that's, of course, helping them as well. But not all young adults have that bank of mom and dad to rely on. When we look at another factor here, I do want to talk about just the baby bust that we're seeing among home buyers. We used to see that 58% of home buyers had a child under the age of 18. Today is just 31%. So a massive drop in the share of people who have a child under the age of 18. That does open up some buying power, but it also does speak to the number of moves that could be happening. So if you have a growing family, you may actually need to move to accommodate that family. If you don't have that growing family, you may not need to make that move. Also, if you don't have a child in the home or have no intention to, perhaps that even opens up some neighborhood choices, looking to overlooked areas as opposed to that A+ school district neighborhood. The other factor for young adults too that we are seeing that has shifted is we are seeing a growth in unmarried couples who are purchasing homes. At the same time, we're seeing a drop in married couples purchasing homes. This is an interesting shift because unmarried couples tend to have lower household incomes, make more financial sacrifices to enter homeownership. We have consistently seen a growth in single women as well, though in the last year it's waned a little bit as affordability has been a really difficult factor. The other factor that we are seeing for first-time homebuyers is that 5% of them are actually purchasing with roommates. I think this is really striking because I think it speaks to people pairing up and saying, affordability is a massive concern. We're renting together. Why don't we go and buy a home together? And we're seeing that big shift in the environment in a way that we haven't in the past. It has always been 1, 2, 3%, and this year it's 5% of first-time homebuyers. I think this is a really interesting environment in this shifting marketplace right now. If we look at this right now, what we see is that there are massive down payment misconceptions that are out there, but people are also entering homeownership in a pretty different way by paying all cash. For repeat buyers, 27% of them also paid all cash when they entered into homeownership. That is up from 17%. Becomes a very difficult environment for these first time home buyers to enter in when they do not really have that opportunity to do so. I think some of the reasons behind this, of course, are that people have that opportunity because they're moving to a farther out place. They've earned this equity over time, and so they have the ability to do so. One of the things that I think could be really important to put out there right now is the amount of buyers who actually do not know what the typical down payment is, and also have high incomes, but they're having a hard time putting that down payment together because of the rental pressures that they may be facing. If we look at the environment right now, we know that there's fewer offers for every home that's listed. This could be the opportunity for those buyers to come back in. If they have that higher income to be able to pay for that higher mortgage payment, there's less competition. So they may be able to get that FHA loan or the VA loan into the marketplace today in a way that if we look at the market 6 months ago, they were not going to be able to do that with those all cash buyers lined up at the door, having this multiple bid situation. When we look at the consumer expectation of what the typical down payment is, there is a massive misconception out there. 16 to 20% thinking you need 35% down, 10% thinking you more than 20% down. We know that's just not true. If we look at the data, the typical down payment for first time home buyers is the blue. It was just 6% last year. And if we look for even repeat buyers, it was 17%. So that really is a change from what we have seen historically, and what the mindset is versus what the actual data is. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about senior buyers. I think this is a fascinating change that we have seen. Baby boomers have absolutely switched up what the expectations are in housing. I recently had the opportunity to go to Hawaii and speak to the Hawaii realtors. That was a once in a lifetime opportunity. And I went in September and I asked my husband, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to Hawaii. Do you want to come with me?" And he said, "I have to work." No. And we live in DC. That would be an extremely long flight, the time change, etc. That's no way he could do that. So I asked my spoiled sister, do you want to go? Can you come with me? And she said, I just bought a house. There is no way that I can take off time work, and I can't work remotely from Hawaii. The time change, that's crazy talk. I can't go with you. So I called my godmother. She lives in Seattle. So I was thinking, okay, well, that's halfway there. And she doesn't work because she's 81. And so I thought, no pressure. Okay, let me just ask her. And so she said yes immediately on the phone and said, wait, can I bring my little sister? And her little sister is 76. And I was like, okay, cool. So we're going to Hawaii. Amazing. I thought this would be such a boring trip, like beautiful, but boring. We'd lay at the beach, we'd go to the pool. And so I packed a couple books, and it turns out no, and that they're insane and wanted to go zip lining and diving with the sharks. And I said, absolutely not. We're not doing that because you're not going to die on my watch. This is not something we're doing. All of that being said, senior buyers have absolutely switched up the buying environment as well. So our expectation of who seniors are today is absolutely different. They are active and they are loving life and they have a lot of money. So in looking at the real estate market today, what we are seeing is that they are very unique. One, they're not downsizing. They're spending the money they have, and they have a lot of money, and they want to buy a new space with all the bells and whistles. We see that they're embracing tech features. They're embracing green features because they can afford to do so. Millennials, when they buy, have to make compromises, even Gen Xers, but they don't necessarily have to do that. We also know that they're the ones who are moving the longest distances away, and they're really feeling a-okay to do that. Though I would say the relationship to the realtor becomes even more important as you're moving a longer distance because they may not know the neighborhood that well. The other thing that we see is that they plan on living in this home forever. There is no intention of leaving in this home and really aging in place. And the other factor as well is that they want to live with other people. Whether it's purchasing with a roommate or purchasing this multi-generational home that they'll live in with other family members, we absolutely see that co-living is very important in having that community. So if it's not in their neighborhood, it's purchasing with other family members as well. And so we see that trend growing. Okay. The other thing I think is really important today, looking at the data, is how long people are staying put and what their expectation is moving forward. When we see how long people are staying put right now, it's a decade. That is a long period of time. It used to be traditionally 6 to 7 years that people were staying in their home and then moving. Today, it's 10 years. The other factor that we see that has really changed in the last year is the expected tenure in home. When first-time homebuyers go to purchase their home at 36 years old, they're planning on holding that home for 18 years. It had been as low as 7. This is a massive change in the marketplace today and what that expectation is. It could very well be that they sell that home much sooner than 18 years because something in their life is going to change, like a growing family or marriage, divorce, new job. All of those things will cause a move. But the expectation to hold on to that home for 18 years surpasses that of even repeat buyers in the marketplace. And I think that's really fascinating when we look at this. It very well could be that because they moved to a farther out place in a small town or an outer suburb, they got more home, they skipped their starter property. And so now they have this larger single family home. That very well could be. It also could be they financed this low interest rate. And so they really have no intention of moving as well. But something really to keep in mind when we think about first-time homebuyers today and how they really have shifted in the marketplace. The agent role is very consistent. So I've talked about a lot of data here, whether it's the current marketplace, these changing demographics, millennial wave that's coming into homeownership. But I do think it's very important to look at the agent role. We do see that 86% of buyers are using an agent right now. It is towards an all-time high. We see that buyers not only want help finding that right home, but help with negotiation, helping them understand that local expert, being the local expert and understanding every step of that buying process. Even if you're a repeat buyer, you haven't done this in a decade. And so going into this process, you essentially are a first-time home buyer. You do not have the information and the tools out there to be able to navigate this process. So you become that conduit to help them understand every step in that buying process. For sellers, we see that 87% are using an agent in the process to sell a home today. And we ask a follow-up question and we ask all kinds of business models. And what we see is that the full service agent is what sellers want and what they used. So someone who's going to help them price that home, tell them how in the world to fix up that home for sale, be able to list that home and find a buyer who's a qualified buyer to be able to bring them to the closing table. And then past the closing table, who do I contact for contractors and services once I'm past that as well? And to help me navigate that process through each step of it, be my guide through that process. I want to give one final note here. I know my last presentation to you all, I talked quite a bit about our race reports that we have released in the last year. We have 3 different new reports on that topic. I did not touch on that at all in this presentation, but I want to give one slide of who the buyers are in the last year and how that has shifted as well. What I will say is this is pretty depressing. When we look at this in the last year, affordability has absolutely hit Black African-American buyers and Asian Pacific Islander buyers more than other buyers in the marketplace. We see that there was a rise in white Caucasian buyers from 82% to 88% last year. We know that affordability is one of the massive hurdles. We know that Black buyers, potential buyers, are paying a disproportionate amount on rent than we do see for other households. So it could be that those rental increases that they have seen are harder hit in that community. And just unfortunately, we are not seeing them in the marketplace. And that did shrink this year. So I didn't talk a lot about that, but I do want to leave that on the table just as one final note in this report. All right, thank you so much. And I'm happy to take any questions if we have time as well.
I just have one question. Well, thank you again. Great stuff as always. when you say all cash, is that literally all cash, or is that waived mortgage contingencies?
That is literally all cash.
Okay.
So yeah, those repeat buyers are paying all cash. They did not finance that home purchase. I think it's, it's a fascinating shift that we have seen in the data in the last year for sure.
Okay. And then I guess my other question, and I don't know how loaded of a question this is. In terms of like people moving out of cities to smaller areas, public safety, moving away from urban areas, is there any data there? Are people avoiding moving to urban areas? Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, we don't have data on the public safety
Like as a
perception or
factor, I
anything like
guess,
that.
right?
Yeah, nothing on that. What I would say is that it really does seem to be affordability is really that key driver, as well as the proximity to friends and family. The commute time to work is actually, oh, I set an alarm so I didn't just talk forever. The commute time to work has gone down in a priority and as a factor of neighborhood choice. So I think that that's fascinating. But it really is that support system and what I can afford, that bang for the dollar. And so many people are just really struggling with affordability in the last year.
Okay. I'm just going to check the chat to see if anybody had
Hey,
any
Jessica.
question.
Hi.
Hey, my name is Edwidge. I'm a realtor from Philadelphia. I just had a question. Where can I actually pull the data if I need it to?
Yeah, absolutely. I would love if everyone downloaded the report actually. I can send the link to Matt so you all can have the direct link with the slides. But the profile of home buyers and sellers is brand new, hot off the presses. It's actually free to members right now. It's 142 pages. I gave a very high level synopsis of what I think is interesting from the report, but grabbing the report is great because it gives so much more information than what I talked about here. And then the Realtors Confidence Index, which I talked about at the beginning, we have a link to the bottom of that. It's updated every month. And tomorrow morning, we're actually going to come up with the latest and greatest data released at 10 a.m. But it's all for free on a monthly basis that you can grab.
Okay.
We'll include everything in a follow-up email that will also have the link to this video for all of our members. So great question there. Thank you very much for that.
Not a problem. I have another question. Did you say African American actually or blacks are actually buying less than white folks? Is that what you had stated?
Yes, this year we did see that there were fewer black buyers in the market and more white buyers in the market in the last year. Yeah.
And black buyers are actually renting more than white buyers.
When they rent, yes, they are renting more, but we also know that when black renters are renting, they're paying more of their income towards rent than white renters are. And so unfortunately, that makes it even more difficult to save for a down payment in that environment if they're paying more for rent on a monthly basis. We also know they're paying more for student loan debt, more likely to have student loan debt. So just general costs are going to be higher and even harder to save for a down payment right now.
I have one more question.
Mm-hmm.
In this situation, is there any programs out there to help anyone that actually is unable to? Is there any programs out there that some type of down payment programs that's able to help folks that is actually unable to put a down payment?
Yeah, in lots of local communities. I'm in Virginia. I don't know about the local down payment programs, but I know HUD.gov has an amazing website that you can bring it down to a state level and then even a local level to see what's available in your local community. In some areas, these down payment programs, they not only help with down payments, they could help with taxes. They might be able to help with student loan debt. So there's all different programs that are out there, but I would absolutely encourage potential buyers go to those. Thank you for Katie, who threw in down payment resource too. Also a great resource there.
And the Philly First Home Grant. The Philly First Home Grant is another program that we've supported and is a good resource for first-time buyers.
Good stuff. I'm glad I asked those questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's called the Philly First Home Program. They go ahead and they administer grants that go towards first-time home buyers in the city of Philadelphia. The maximum grant amount is $10,000. Usually the average is somewhere in the $8,000 to $9,000 range. But in addition to the grant program, there's also an education component and helping people get ready for making that purchase. And then when they ultimately make the purchase, what do you got to do as it relates to home ownership? Because as we know, you buy a house and the next thing you know, like 2 months later, something goes or a problem arises or what have you, you know, all the joys of home ownership and the things that come out. So the cool part is that program helps you with that on-ramping to making that purchase. So it's pretty good, it's pretty thoughtful, and it's wildly successful. And we have partnered up with that with NAR. And it's been really great to be a part of that. So fully first home grant program.
Good stuff. Thank you.
We're also going to have a coffee talk tomorrow with Ken Weinstein and Jumpstart Germantown, which is a program that helps first-time investors. So could be worth checking out.
Cool.
Cool. Any other questions in the chat? I don't see. Matt, do you have anything else?
Nicole Green dropped in a question, and it was about how are so many home buyers paying with cash? Is it just from home equity, or are they mostly investors?
For the repeat buyers in this report, these are primary residence buyers, so they are pulling equity, I'm guessing. We also know that some of them are using savings, some of them are cashing out for 401k or retirement earnings for down payments, but I'm guessing that it could be a combination of all three if they're paying all cash. But I think a lot of people have earned a lot of home equity, especially in the last 2 years, and they're moving to more affordable areas, and so they're able to pay all cash. That's unfortunate for first-time home buyers who are truly in this situation where they could be up against these all cash buyers and losing out on bids.
Okay, so I think we're good. Thank you very much, Jessica. Awesome. Jake, thanks for kicking off our coffee talk. We're going back to back. Another coffee talk tomorrow. And Jessica, we hope to see you back with us in 2023. You've been an awesome contributor to us over the last number of years, and your reports are also dynamite, helpful, and very insightful. And like you just heard, folks, she's taking 100 and something pages and condensing it down into this bite-sized nuggets of about 10 bits. Good stuff. So we really appreciate all that you've done for us, Jessica, over the years.
Thank you very much, Jessica. We really appreciate the insight.
Thank you.
All right. Take care, everyone. Have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow.